Jack stood alone on the outskirts of the base, his boots crunching on the dirt ground as he gazed up at the dim sky. The stars were hidden behind a blanket of clouds, and the only sounds were the distant hum of machinery and the occasional calls of strange creatures in the distance. It had been a long day, another routine patrol on a planet far from Earth. The assignment was supposed to be quiet, peaceful even. But nothing ever stayed peaceful for long. He had been stationed on the alien world of Valor, a remote planet on the edge of the galaxy. It was beautiful in its own way, with its towering mountains, vast forests, and strange wildlife. Yet despite its beauty, there was always a sense of isolation. The planet was surrounded by endless stretches of space, and the local species were wary of human involvement. As Jack walked through the empty fields near the base, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Something was off today. He stopped for a moment, taking a breath, and scanned the horizon. That's when he saw her, a figure moving slowly toward him. She was stumbling, her movements uncertain, as if she were struggling to stay upright. At first, Jack thought she might be one of the locals, one of the strange alien species that inhabited the planet. But as she came closer, he saw her face, and his heart skipped a beat. She was an alien, but not one he recognized. Her skin was a soft shade of green, almost like the moss he had seen growing in the forest earlier that day. Her long hair shimmered in the dim light, a pale silver that flowed like liquid under the wind.
Ow.
But it was her eyes that caught Jack's attention the most. They were wide, filled with tears, and radiated fear. There was something fragile about her, something that made Jack's heart twist in his chest. "Hey," Jack called out, instinctively stepping forward. "Are you okay?" The alien woman stopped, her breath shallow as she looked up at him. She said something in a language Jack didn't understand, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with desperation. Her words were broken, like she was struggling to speak. Jack didn't know what she was saying, but he could feel the urgency in her tone. "Hold on," Jack said softly, his voice steady, though his heart raced. I had no idea what was happening. But something told him she needed help. He took a cautious step forward, offering his hand, hoping it would be enough. To his surprise, she reached out and grasped it. Her fingers were warm, and as they touched, Jack felt a strange connection. It wasn't like anything he had ever felt before. There was an electricity in the air, a bond that he couldn't explain. "Come on," he said gently, leading her toward the base. "Let's get you some help." She didn't resist, but her movements were slow, as if she were struggling with every step. As they walked together, Jack kept glancing at her, trying to make sense of what was happening. He had never seen an alien like her before. Her features were delicate, her beauty otherworldly, but her eyes, they held a sadness, a pain that spoke to something deep within him. When they reached the base, Jack quickly led her to the medbay, where the staff immediately began assessing her. But as they worked, Jack stayed by her side, watching her carefully. He wanted to help, but he didn't know how. "Who is she?" one of the medics asked, looking at Jack with confusion. "I don't know," Jack replied. "She came to me alone. She was hurt." The medic nodded, but there was a look of uncertainty in his eyes. "She's not one of the locals. But she's definitely not human either." Jack nodded, his mind racing. He had seen some strange things in his time and space, but nothing like this. Nothing that made his knees shake. Hours passed, and Aro Jack had learned her name was Arawaz. Stable, though still unconscious. The medic told Jack she would be fine, but they needed to run a few more tests. Jack sat by her bed, his mind swirling with questions. Who was she? What was she doing here? Why had she come to Earth for help? As he sat there, his thoughts were interrupted by a soft groan. Ara's eyes fluttered open, and she looked around in confusion. Jack stood up immediately, his hand reaching out to her. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his voice filled with concern. She blinked, her tear-filled eyes focusing on him. Her lips parted, and she whispered something. But the words didn't make sense. "I don't understand," Jack said, his heart sinking. A wire seemed to struggle with her words. But after a long pause, she finally managed to speak in broken English. "I need help." Jack's heart clenched. He had no idea what she was talking about, but there was something in her voice, a pleading that he couldn't ignore. "What kind of help?" Jack asked, sitting beside her. "Tell me what happened." Seemed to gather herself for a moment, then her eyes filled with tears. She spoke again. "My people, they are dying. The war, it is too much." The words hit Jack like a punch to the stomach. A war? What war? And why was she here on Earth, seeking help? He had no answers. But one thing was clear. Era was in trouble, and it was his responsibility to help her. "I don't know what you mean," Jack said gently, trying to comfort her. "But we'll figure this out. I'll help you." Ara's eyes searched his face, and for a moment, it seemed like she was trying to see if he truly understood her. Then, with a shuddering breath, she whispered, "Please, you must help us. We are running out of time." Jack's mind raced as he processed her words. He didn't know what kind of danger Era and her people were in, but he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her to face it alone. "I'll do whatever I can," Jack promised. Era's tear-filled eyes softened as she looked at him. "You are the last hope," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack's knees shook as he stood up, his body trembling not from fear, but from the weight of the responsibility she had just placed on him. What had he just agreed to? And what kind of danger was he about to step into? The room was dimly lit with soft lights that cast gentle shadows on the walls. Jack sat across from Era, who was still lying in the bed, her eyes watching him intently. Despite the medical supplies that had been used to treat her wounds, she seemed far from at ease. The fear and desperation in her eyes hadn't faded. Even though her physical injuries had been taken, care of Jack had learned from the medic that Era's species was unknown to them. She was unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Her skin, a soft green shade, was smooth and delicate, and her long silver hair shined like strands of metal. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a haunting sadness that sent a chill down Jack's spine. Every word seemed to weigh heavy with something unspeakable, something far bigger than her. "I know you must be confused," Era began, her voice soft, though it trembled slightly. "And I can't explain everything at once, but I need you to listen." Jack nodded, his mind still spinning from everything she had already said. I had never met anyone like Ara, and now, sitting across from her, he wasn't sure what to believe. But he knew one thing. He couldn't ignore her plea. She was asking for help, and he felt a strange pull to do whatever he could to assist her. "You told me. Your people are dying. Can you explain what that means? What kind of war are you talking about?" Jack asked, trying to sound calm even though the anxiety in his chest made it difficult to breathe. Ara took a deep breath, her eyes casting downward for a moment as though searching for the right words. She looked back at him, her gaze locking onto his. Her eyes, filled with fear, became more intense as she spoke. "We are not the only ones out here. My people, the Valerians, have lived in peace for generations. But a few cycles ago, we encountered an enemy unlike anything we had ever imagined. They are called the Thrax, and they are relentless, cruel, and powerful." Jack's heart skipped a beat. He had heard of many alien species during his training, but he had never heard of the Thrax. The name sent a wave of unease over him, but he kept his voice steady as he pressed on. "The Thrax? What do they want?" Ara's eyes grew darker. As she spoke, "They are conquerors. They do not care for peace or freedom. They care only for power. They arrived on our planet without warning, slaughtering our people. We fought back, but the Thrax have an army unlike any the galaxy has ever seen. Our weapons are no match for them. The Valerians, we are losing." Jack felt a chill run through him. The idea of an unstoppable enemy wiping out an entire species was terrifying. He had seen conflict before, but this was different. The gravity of the situation was sinking in, and the reality of Ara's words began to hit him hard. "Why come to Earth, then?" Jack asked. "Why not seek help from other galaxies?" Ara's gaze softened, and a small sigh escaped her lips. "I've traveled across many systems, trying to find someone willing to listen. But I came to Earth because I believe you humans are different. I've heard of your strength, your will to survive. The galaxy laughs at your species, calling you primitive. But I know the truth. Jack felt a slight sting at her words. Humans had always been looked down upon by more advanced species. His own people had struggled to prove their worth, in a galaxy that seemed to think of them as inferior. But Era's words hit differently. They felt like a spark of hope, even in the darkest of times. "You believe we can help you?" Jack asked, disbelief in his voice. Ara nodded solemnly. "Yes. You are not like the others. You fight for what is right, for your people. The Thrax may be more powerful, but they are not unstoppable. You are the key to ending this war." Jack leaned back in his chair, trying to process the weight of her words. It was a lot to take in. One moment, he had been on a routine assignment, and now he was being asked to help save a species from annihilation, a species that was unlike anything humanity had encountered before. "So, what are we supposed to do?" Jack asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "How do we fight a war we know nothing about?" Era's eyes burned with intensity as she met his gaze. "You don't have to know everything. You just have to trust me. You are stronger than you think. Humans have a power that others do not understand. The Thrax underestimate you, and that is their greatest mistake." Jack was silent for a moment, taking in her words. Could they really make a difference? Could humanity's strength, something other species considered a weakness, be the very thing that turned the tide of this war? The thought seemed impossible, but Ara's belief in them was unwavering. It was hard to deny. The sincerity in her eyes. "I don't know how we can help you," Jack said, his voice heavy with doubt. "But I'll try. I'll talk to my commanders. If they believe it's possible, we'll do what we can." Ara's face lit up, her eyes brightening as she reached for his hand. "Thank you, Jack. You have no idea what this means. You are our last hope." Her touch was soft, but there was a strength in it. The kind of strength that came from knowing that everything depended on the outcome of this one decision. Jack could feel the weight of it, the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. As they sat there in the quiet of the med bay, Jack couldn't help but think about the implications of what he had just agreed to. It wasn't just about fighting for Era's people anymore. It was about fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. If they could stand up to the Thrax and win, it would prove that humans were more than just a primitive species. It would show that Earth and its people were powerful, capable of overcoming any obstacle. But that was a big if. "You're sure you're not just desperate?" Jack asked, his voice lowering. "You said it yourself, your people are losing. What if this is all just a last hope that won't work?" Ara's expression turned serious, her voice steady. "I wouldn't have come to you if I didn't believe in your people. I know the risks, but if we don't fight, we lose everything, and that is something I cannot allow." Jack nodded slowly, realizing the gravity of the decision he was about to make. There was no going back now. He had already promised to help. But what would that help look like? And would humanity be able to live up to the challenge? He didn't have the answers yet, but he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The sun had begun to set outside the military base, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Jack sat in his small room, staring out the window. The air was still, and the quiet felt suffocating. Hadn't been able to shake Era's words from his mind since their conversation earlier that day. They echoed in his thoughts like a constant hum. The Thrax were coming. They were relentless, and they had already begun to wipe out entire species across the galaxy. And now, Earth had been dragged into it. He rubbed his face with both hands. Trying to focus, he had to make a decision. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about humanity, about Earth, about the future of the galaxy. "What am I supposed to do?" he muttered under his breath. "I'm just a soldier." The weight of his responsibility seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. Jack had never considered himself a leader. He was trained to follow orders, to fight, to protect. But this wasn't just about protecting his people anymore. This was something bigger. This was about saving an entire species, an entire planet. Could humans really stand a chance against the Thrax? His mind kept drifting back to Ara. Her eyes had been filled with fear, yes, but also with hope. She believed in him. She believed in humanity. That was a burden Jack didn't know how to carry. There was a knock at the door, pulling Jack from his thoughts. He stood up quickly, his heart racing, and opened it to find Sergeant Williams standing. In the doorway, the sergeant was a tall, tough man with a no-nonsense attitude. But today, his face looked more serious than usual. "Jack," Williams said, his voice low, "you need to come with me. They're calling for a briefing." Jack nodded and followed Williams down the narrow hallways of the base. His heart beat faster with every step. The briefing. This was it. He would finally know what Earth's military command thought about Aira's request for help. Were they going to help her people? Would they turn their backs on an entire species, as they had done before? They entered the conference room, where several high-ranking officers were already gathered around a large table. The room was cold, the air heavy with tension. Jack took a seat at the far end, his eyes scanning the faces of the commanders. They all looked like they had made up their minds already. General Hayes, a tall woman with graying hair, was the first to speak. Her eyes met Jack's, and he could see the weariness in them. She had seen too many wars, too many battles that never ended. "Jack," she began, "we've been briefed on the situation. We know about Aira's species, the Valerians, and their plight. And we know about the Thrax." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He had been hoping for a simple answer, but it was never that easy. "General," he said, voice steady, but filled with uncertainty, "I know I'm just a soldier, but I've spoken with Aira. She believes humanity can help." "She believes?" "We have the strength to stop the Thrax." General Hayes gave him a hard look before glancing at the others in the room. "The Thrax are not a threat to be taken lightly, Jack. Their forces are unmatched. We have the technology, but even our best weapons would be useless against them if they decided to come for us." Jack felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The words "they decided to come for us" stuck in his mind. Was Earth truly ready for this? Could they stop a race like the Thrax? And if not, would they be able to survive what was coming? "We've considered all possibilities," another officer, Colonel Grant, said from across the table. "And while we're sympathetic to Aira's plea, we can't ignore the risks. Earth has only just begun to establish itself as a power in the galaxy. We cannot afford to put ourselves in a position where we are fighting on two fronts, not with the Thrax." Jack's stomach twisted. "But what happens if we do nothing?" he asked, his voice rising with urgency. "If we turn our backs on them, the Thrax will come for us eventually. They won't stop at the Valerians. They'll spread, and we'll be next." The room fell silent. No one spoke for a long moment. Jack could feel the weight of their decision pressing down on him. The faces around the table were unreadable, but he could see the hesitation in their eyes. They knew what was at stake, but they were afraid. Afraid to make the wrong move. Finally, General Hayes spoke again, her voice calm but firm. "You're right, Jack. We can't just sit by and do nothing. But we also can't rush into this without considering all options. We need a plan. A real strategy. This isn't just about throwing our forces into a battle. It's about survival. It's about ensuring that humanity has a place in this galaxy. If we help the Valerians, we must be prepared for whatever comes next." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of her words. This wasn't just about fighting a war. This was about humanity's future. They couldn't afford to lose this fight, not when so much was at risk. "What are you asking, General?" Jack asked, his voice quieter now. "What do you need from me?" General Hayes leaned back in her chair, her eyes never leaving his. "We need you to continue working with Aira. We need more information on the Thrax, if we are going to join. This fight, we have to understand exactly what we're up against. You're the one she trusts. We'll give you the resources you need, but you must bring back information. Detailed, accurate intelligence. We'll take it from there." Jack's heart raced. He had been hoping for a clear answer, but now he realized it was never going to be that simple. He was going to be in the middle of this, a human soldier fighting alongside an alien species. Wasn't sure how it would work, but he knew he had no choice. Earth's future depended on it. "Understood," Jack said, standing up. "I'll do everything I can." General Hayes nodded, a small sign of approval in her eyes. "Good. This isn't going to be easy, Jack, but if we're going to win this war, we need to take the first step. You've already taken it by helping, Ara. Now we need you to take the next one. Jack turned and walked out of the room, his mind spinning with the decision he had just made. He was going to help Ara. He was going to help her people. But more than that, he was going to help humanity. He wasn't sure if they could win, but he was going to make sure they tried. The battle had just begun. The hum of the base's alarms pierced through the quiet air, echoing down the hallways. Jack stood frozen in the command center, his mind racing. The Thrax were coming, and they were closer than anyone had predicted. The reports had come in. Fast and urgent, a full-scale attack on a nearby system, and the Thrax weren't stopping. The question now was, how could humanity stop them? "We don't have much time," General Hayes said, her voice calm but urgent as she paced in front of the gathered officers. "The Thrax are moving quickly. We've got a small window to prepare before they reach Earth's outer defenses. If we're going to stop them, we need to act now." Jack's heart raced. He had never seen his commanders so serious. The threat was real, and the enemy was already making their move. He looked over at Ara, who stood beside him, her face tight with worry. She had been silent since the news broke, but he could see the weight of it all in her eyes. "Ara," Jack said, quietly glancing at her. "Are you sure about this? Are you sure you want to do this?" She nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the holographic map in front of them. "We don't have a choice. If they take us down, Earth will be next. I came here to ask for help. Now, it's time for humanity to decide if they'll fight with us." Jack watched her with a mixture of admiration and fear. She was right. The stakes were higher than ever. But could humanity truly stand against the Thrax? The alien race was ruthless, and their technology was far beyond anything Jack had ever seen. Even with Earth's might, could they hold their ground? General Hayes stepped forward, cutting into Jack's thoughts. "We've analyzed the incoming threat. Their fleet is massive. They're armed with weapons that can tear through most of our defenses. But we've got one thing they don't expect: human ingenuity. Our scientists have been working on something new, something that might just give us the edge we need." Jack blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "We've been developing a new kind of weapon, a defense system that could potentially counter the Thrax's technology. But it's still in the testing phase. I didn't think we'd need it this soon." General Hayes turned to one of the officers, who activated the holographic display in front of them. A new weapon appeared on the screen, a sleek and complex design that Jack had never seen before. "This is it," the officer said, pointing to the device on the map. "It's a prototype, but it could be humanity's best chance. It's a deep space cannon, designed to disrupt the Thrax's energy shields. If we can get it operational in time, it might give us a fighting chance." Jack studied the weapon, trying to understand how it could help. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie, far beyond anything he had imagined. But then again, this was humanity's last hope. And he wasn't going to question it now. "How soon can we get it online?" Jack asked, his voice firm. General Hayes hesitated for a moment. "We have a small team working on it, but we need more resources, more time, and that's the problem. If we don't have it ready by the time the Thrax arrive, it will be too late." Jack's mind was racing. "So we need to hold them off until we can get the weapon ready?" "Yes," General Hayes confirmed. "We've got a few ships in our fleet, but they won't be enough to stop the Thrax on their own. We'll need every soldier, every piece of technology we have. We'll need you, Jack. You've seen the Thrax firsthand. You know what we're up against." Jack turned to Ara, who was still standing beside him, her face pale but determined. He could see how much this meant to her, how much it meant to the survival of her people. The weight of the decision was heavy, but there was no turning back now. If they didn't fight, everything would be lost. "Ara," Jack said, his voice steady, "you've got the right to lead this fight. But we'll need to work together. We need every advantage we can get." Ara met his gaze, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I will do whatever it takes. My people have already lost so much. This is our last chance." Jack nodded, turning back to General Hayes. "I'll lead the team. We'll buy you time to get that weapon online." "I'll do everything I can." General Hayes gave him a sharp nod. We'll need you in command of a small strike team. You'll be our first line of defense. Get to the enemy before they can strike. Hold them off as long as possible. And when that cannon is ready, we'll hit them with everything we've got." The briefing ended quickly after that, and Jack gathered his team. He was nervous, more than he wanted to admit, but there was no time to waste. They had a mission to complete, and the fate of Earth depended on them. As he stood with his team outside the command center, ready to head to their ships, Ara came. Up beside him, she looked at him with something between gratitude and sorrow in her eyes. "Are you sure about this?" Ara asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack nodded, his expression serious. "We don't have a choice. Or we die. Together." She smiled, though it was a small and sad smile. "I trust you, Jack. I know you'll do everything you can." Jack's heart swelled with determination. He didn't know if they could win, but he knew they couldn't give up. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. As they boarded their ships, Jack felt the weight of what was about to happen. He didn't know how the battle would end, or if they could hold the line long enough for the deep space cannon to be ready. But one thing was clear. He wasn't going to stop fighting. Not while Era and her people needed him. Not while humanity's future was at stake. The first shots of the battle were fired shortly after they launched, and Jack's heart pounded in his chest. The Thrax were here, and this fight had just begun. The stars outside the ship's window looked calm, almost serene, but Jack knew better. The quiet was only an illusion. The Thrax were out there, waiting, preparing to strike. Their fleet was massive, and Jack's small strike team was barely a blip on the radar compared to the might of the enemy. But it didn't matter. He had made a promise to Ara, to Earth, and to himself. He would fight. The tension in the cockpit was palpable. Jack sat at the front, his hands gripping the controls of the fighter ship, as his team of 5 soldiers settled into their seats behind him. Their faces were grim, their eyes set with determination. They had trained for this, but no amount of training could prepare them for the chaos that was about to unfold. "Jack, we're almost at the coordinates," Sergeant Williams said, his voice steady, despite the nerves he must have been feeling. "What's the plan?" Jack glanced over at Williams. He had known the sergeant for years. Williams was a reliable man, strong in combat and unshaken by pressure. But this mission was different. This wasn't just about a skirmish or a routine fight. This was the beginning of something much bigger. "We hit them hard and fast," Jack said, his voice low. "We don't have the luxury of waiting around. Our job is to disrupt their formation, cause as much damage as we can, and buy time.
Ow.
The deep space cannon won't be ready for a while, but we have to give it that chance." Williams nodded, checking his weapons systems. "Understood. We're in this together." The silence that followed was heavy with the unspoken understanding of what lay ahead. Jack could feel the weight of it. All this was no longer just a mission. It was the fight for humanity's survival. There was no turning back. "Jack," Era's voice came through the comms, soft but urgent. "I know this is difficult, but please be careful. The Thrax are ruthless. They will not hesitate." "No, Ara," Jack replied, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling in his mind. "We'll be ready. Just stay safe. I'll come back to you." The connection cut off, and Jack took a deep breath. He couldn't afford to let his thoughts wander. Not now. They were too close to the enemy. Their first strike was coming. Ship jolted as they broke through the atmosphere, entering the thick black of space. The Thrax fleet appeared on their sensors, enormous and menacing. They were still far away, but Jack could already see the dark shapes of their warships. Their sleek designs built for destruction. The Thrax weren't here to negotiate, they were here to conquer. "We're going in," Jack said, his voice tight with anticipation. He flipped a switch, and his ship's engines roared to life. "Follow my lead." The small fleet of human ships moved into position, lining up behind Jack's fighter. Their mission was simple: get in close, disrupt the enemy, and give Earth's forces enough time to prepare for the real battle. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he guided the ship through the void of space. They were outnumbered, but the element of surprise was on their side. As they closed the distance, the first shots were fired. The Thrax had seen them coming, and they didn't waste any time. Red beams of energy lit up the dark expanse, lighting up the night like fireworks. Jack's ship rocked as a blast hit its shields, but the ship held strong. Brace for impact. Jack yelled as another blast came from the Thrax ships. His team responded instantly, adjusting their shields and weapons. Locking on to enemy targets. Williams shouted from the back of the ship, "We're ready to fire on your mark." Jack gritted his teeth, focusing on the task at hand. Thrax ships were powerful, but they had their weaknesses. Their weapons relied on precise energy control, and if they could get close enough, they could disrupt their systems. The problem was, getting close meant taking a lot of hits. Now, Jack commanded. The ships under his command fired in unison, sending blasts of energy into the heart of the Thrax formation. The first few shots hit their mark, causing one of the enemy ships to explode in a burst of fire. The rest of the fleet was quick to react, returning fire with even more fury. The battle erupted around them, chaos swirling in every direction. Jack's heart raced, but his focus remained unshaken. He weaved through the explosions, dodging blasts as they came. The adrenaline was like a fire burning in his veins, making everything seem sharp and clear. "Keep pushing," Jack shouted. "We've got to make a hole," his team responded, staying close, attacking in coordinated strikes. It wasn't easy. The Thrax ships were heavily armored, and their counterattacks were devastating. But they couldn't afford to stop. They couldn't afford to give up. The fate of Earth and Ara's people depended on them. Minutes felt like hours as they fought. They're way deeper into the enemy formation. Jack's ship shook again as another blast hit. The shields were holding, but they wouldn't last forever. Jack could feel the strain on the ship, on his team. But there was no turning back now. "We've caused a dent," Williams reported. "We're breaking their line." Jack could see it too. The Thrax were starting to falter. The coordinated strikes were paying off, and the enemy ships were becoming disorganized. But it wasn't enough. They needed more time. They needed the deep space cannon. "We've got to pull back," Jack called. "We've done what we can. Fall back to the rendezvous point." One by one, Jack's team broke away from the fight, retreating toward the designated position. The Thrax were quick to regroup, but the damage had been done. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the enemy ships struggle to reorganize. They had given Earth a chance. Now, it was up to the others. "Jack, we're in position," Williams reported as they reached the rendezvous point. "We're waiting for your command." God. Jack looked out into space, watching as the battle raged on in the distance. The Thrax hadn't given up, but they had been slowed down. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They had done their part. Now it was time to wait for the next move. "We've bought them some time," Jack said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Now, we just have to hope it's enough." As the dust settled and the ships began to regroup, Jack knew that this was just the beginning. The Thrax were still out there, still a threat to everything they held dear. But for the first time, since this mission began, Jack allowed himself to believe humanity had a chance.